No one else will be involved from now on. Richard, the fiancé of my eldest daughter Linda, declares this with a smug smile. What? What are you talking about? I raise my voice in surprise, not expecting Richard's remark. Well, Linda told me. You're not her mom, right? You're just an outsider, aren't you? As I stand there in shock, my second daughter Olivia slams the table and stands up. Enough is enough. What's wrong with you? Dad, how can you approve Linda's marriage to this rude man? Olivia's face turns red as she fires off these words. Before I can get angry, my daughter is already outraged, and my husband Joseph responds with a troubled look. Olivia, calm down. You shouldn't say anything more. I hug the agitated Olivia and glare at Richard. Understood. Richard responds with the same smug smile to my words. Linda, lucky you. This outsider won't interfere with us anymore. A dinner that was supposed to be enjoyable is now chaotic because of Richard. Olivia, who was looking forward to a rare family gathering, finally breaks down crying. Yet, neither Linda nor Richard seem to care. I won't have anything to do with people who hurt Olivia like this anymore. Even if Linda defies me, she's still my daughter. I don't want to upset Linda, but I can't forgive the two who made Olivia feel this way. If they treat me like an outsider, I have my own thoughts. Linda and Richard couldn't have imagined that at this moment. They would lose everything. My name is Mary, 48 years old. I work as an office clerk at a friend's company. Privately, I currently live with my husband and 2 daughters, 4 of us in total. My husband Joseph is 1 year younger than me, 47, and he had a previous wife before marrying me. The 2 daughters are not my biological children, but born to my husband and his ex-wife. My eldest daughter Linda is 28 this year, and the youngest, Olivia, is 25. When Joseph and I got married, both officially became my daughters. When I first met them, they were both in elementary school. Having separated from their mother at a young age, the girls and I, all women, quickly became close. I heard from Joseph that their mother repeatedly cheated after getting married. Even after Olivia was born, his ex-wife's bad habits didn't improve, and Joseph, troubled, ended up divorcing her. Joseph was busy working to support the 2 of them, managing only the bare minimum in parenting. Their meals often consisted of frozen foods and noodles, so I made an effort to cook homemade meals. I also bought them girlish clothes and visited them as often as I could. During that time, Joseph and I decided to get married. My parents were against it from the start of our relationship. I knew the difficulties of marrying a man with children, but I pushed through my parents' opposition and left home to be with Joseph. At first, I was just happy to spend time with all 4 of us, and I didn't mind the hardships. But as we got used to each other, I began to understand why my parents were against this marriage. The girls, who used to see me as an older sister, couldn't accept me suddenly becoming their mother. They didn't take me seriously, and when Joseph wasn't around, they did as they pleased. When I got too angry at them, Joseph didn't like it and blamed me. You're just bothered by them because they're not your real children, right? I was deeply hurt by his words, which he said almost every day. Each time, the fact that Linda and Olivia were not my biological daughters weighed heavily on me. There were times when my relationship with Joseph soured over how I interacted with the girls, but we never reached an irreparable rift. Meanwhile, my relationship with the daughters became more and more troubled. Olivia, who was lively as a child, started to support me as she grew up. She often helped with the housework voluntarily and began to treat me more like a mother. However, Linda, the elder one, grew to dislike me more and more as she matured. It might have been her age, but it seemed she didn't accept me as her mother. Joseph would only say it was unavoidable and never scolded Linda for her defiance. Since Joseph didn't firmly reprimand Linda, she didn't think her behavior was wrong. Olivia often tried to intervene, but Linda's attitude towards me never improved. In high school, Linda began to openly attack me. "Can you stop ordering me around, you outsider? What's your intention? It's annoying." When I took them in as my daughters, I was prepared for some challenges, but at this rate, Linda will never see me as her mother. "Hey, isn't that too much? If you don't say something, we'll be stuck like this forever." I felt this was a serious issue and consulted Joseph each time, but he always sided with Linda. "It's natural she doesn't accept you. You're not her real mother. Can't you understand that?" By this time, Joseph had also started to openly attack me. I understand a parent's love, but isn't it a parent's duty to discipline when necessary? As I feared, Joseph's leniency only worsened Linda's behavior. She stopped attending high school seriously and often didn't come home. Even when Olivia managed to contact her, Linda brushed her off, saying she was with her boyfriend. I couldn't allow a high school girl to stay at a man's house. Even when Olivia handed the phone to me, Linda wouldn't listen. I hesitated to tell Joseph, knowing it would shock him, but I had no choice. However, Joseph's anger, now openly hostile towards me, was directed at me. "It's your fault Linda ended up like this." Joseph was distraught, but Olivia's stern rebuke stopped his attack on me. "Dad, enough! Mom warned us many times and you never said anything." Perhaps Joseph realized his part in this. Chastised by Olivia, he pounded the table, his anger having nowhere else to go. After that, Joseph kept deceiving himself, pretending not to see Linda's behavior. Unable to do anything, Linda eventually dropped out of high school. After dropping out, Linda barely came home, and even Joseph didn't know what she was doing. The family was falling apart, but thanks to Olivia, Joseph and I stayed together. Time passed, and one day, when Olivia turned 25, she said, "Mom, it seems Linda is getting married," Olivia muttered when she got back from work. Linda, who hadn't been coming home much since that time, was regularly checked on by Olivia for her well-being. Linda, who had rarely come home since then, always had a boyfriend despite not working after dropping out. Now, she was finally getting married. Despite being estranged, I was happy to hear this family celebration news. Joseph heard about Linda's marriage, and for the first time in a while, the three of us laughed together. Even Linda contacted us, wanting to talk in person with her fiancé. Olivia seemed the most relieved by this news. She hoped that improving her relationship with Linda would also mend mine and Joseph's. There had been many issues, but we might be able to laugh together as a family of four, like when we first met. A faint hope filled my heart. A few days later, as promised, Linda came home. It had been about a year since she last visited, so it was a rare occasion for the whole family to be together. Beside Linda stood her fiancé, Richard, in a suit. "Nice to meet you. I'm Richard, Linda's boyfriend." Richard seemed serious but avoided making eye contact with me, speaking only to Joseph and Olivia. "Linda hasn't been home much. I'm sorry for any worries caused." Richard had been dating Linda for about 2 years, but we'd hardly seen each other in that time. Both Linda and Richard acted as if I were invisible, following Joseph into the living room. Noticing their behavior, Olivia frowned and looked at me. "Mom." Olivia seemed to want to say more, but I stopped her, taking her hand and following the others. We sat across from Linda and Richard with the table between us. Surrounded by fancy sweets prepared for today, the conversation began. "Dad? Olivia? It's been a while." Linda was deliberately ignoring me. "Linda, have you been ignoring Mom since you got here?" Olivia was getting irritated with Linda's attitude. "Eh? Oh, you're here." Linda laughed mockingly, and Richard joined in. Olivia looked like she wanted to say more, but I stopped her. "Olivia, it's fine." Olivia's mouth formed the words, "but." "Let's focus on why we're here today. To introduce Richard." As if our exchange hadn't happened, Linda turned to look at Richard next to her. Prompted by Linda, Richard straightened up and began to speak. "I will marry Linda and make her happy. Please accept my regards." Richard spoke formally, looking at Joseph. "This is my daughter. Please take care of her." Joseph's words made Linda and Richard hold hands and smile. "There's something we want to say." Linda prompted Richard. "No outsiders will be involved from now on." Richard looked straight at me and declared this with a smug smile. "What? What are you talking about?" His unexpected words left me in shock. Even as a joke, this was beyond mischief. "Well, Linda told me you're not a real mom, right? Just an outsider?" Richard seemed to enjoy my reaction. I thought our fractured family relationship was mending, but that hope was cruelly shattered. Speechless, I could only compare Linda and Richard's faces. Seeing this, Olivia slammed the table and stood up. "Enough! What's wrong with you, Dad? Can you really approve Linda's marriage to this rude person?" Olivia's face turned red as she lashed out. Before I could get angry, my daughter Olivia expressed her indignation, and Joseph responded with a troubled look. "Olivia, calm down. Don't say anything more." This was the first time Olivia, who had always been on my side, was reprimanded by Joseph. I hugged an agitated Olivia and glared at Richard. "Understood." The three of them exchanged looks at my words. I won't have anything to do with people who hurt Olivia anymore. As I declared this, Joseph looked a bit troubled, but Richard and Linda started laughing. "We didn't hurt Olivia, but okay. Anyway, you're not invited to the wedding." Linda's words were followed by Richard's nod. "It's unthinkable to invite irrelevant outsiders to such a special day." Richard said this and began eating the sweets on the table. "Mom, it's okay. I don't want to see these people anymore," Olivia muttered, her eyes tearing up. Olivia is dear to Joseph, just like Linda. "Olivia, don't say that." Joseph, disturbed by her tears, stood up but was stopped by Linda. "Dad, leave it. Let it go." Joseph, offered a drink by Richard, hesitantly took the glass. I spoke to Olivia and left the living room. Overwhelmed by shock, Olivia continued to sob. We could hear their laughter from the living room, but Olivia and I quickly left the house. I took Olivia to my parents' home, where they had been quietly watching over us since I married Joseph. I felt guilty for turning to them only when in need, but they were our only refuge. I'm sorry for coming only when convenient. My parents were surprised to see us, but welcomed us with smiles. Seeing Olivia's tears, my mother seemed deeply pained. After explaining everything in the living room, my parents advised us to stay for a while. Olivia wished to stay, so we gratefully accepted their kindness. I sent a brief message to Joseph, assuring him of Olivia's safety, after receiving several calls. Although Joseph scolded Olivia at the time, he seemed worried about his daughter. Olivia, feeling betrayed by Joseph's siding with Richard and Linda, refused to forgive him. "I don't want to talk to Dad," she said, indicating no intention of returning home. While Joseph was at work, Olivia and I packed our belongings and moved them out. Though not intending to divorce, we decided to live apart for a while. Joseph didn't apologize directly, but seemed remorseful about his attitude towards Olivia. However, he had no intention of blaming Linda or Richard. As time passed, the date for Linda and Richard's wedding was set. Despite reluctance, Olivia agreed to attend the wedding after Linda and Joseph's persistent requests. "Mom, I don't want to go." Olivia was reluctant until the last moment, but I persuaded her. "They say they won't involve outsiders anymore, right? I want you to see what that really means." I told her this meaningfully, and she reluctantly agreed. "I'll go, but I will never forgive Linda and that Richard." Olivia, dressed in a suit, left for the ceremony. When Olivia arrived at the venue, Joseph was waiting at the entrance. "Olivia!" He was relieved to see her after so long, but Olivia's feelings hadn't changed. After a brief exchange, she was led to the reception hall. "What's this? Am I early?" Entering the venue, Olivia couldn't help but exclaim. She had arrived just before the ceremony to avoid talking to Linda and Richard. Checking her watch against the invitation, she was right on time, 5 minutes before the start. Yet, the venue was sparsely populated. A few relatives and friends of Linda were seated on the bride's side, but the groom's side, which should have been filled with Richard's colleagues and friends, was almost empty. Only Richard's parents and a few friends seemed to be present. As Olivia stood puzzled, Richard's angry voice could be heard. "What's going on here?" She turned to see Richard in a tuxedo, shouting at the reception desk. "Why aren't my guests here? Was there a mistake in the invitations?" He was berating a friend at the reception, but the invitations were correct. Linda, worriedly peeking from a room, was also visible. The scheduled time passed and the hall grew increasingly restless. Confused, Olivia had a sudden realization. Could it be Mom did something? I chose that moment of panic to appear at the venue. "What are you doing here?" Linda, who was making frantic calls with Richard, noticed me. Olivia, hearing Linda shout, ran to me. "Mom, what's happening? Why are you here and where are all the guests?" Olivia, full of questions, asked me why I was at the venue uninvited and why none of the guests had shown up. "Did you do something?" Richard, noticing our exchange, approached angrily. "Stay away. Since you said you didn't want anything to do with outsiders, I informed your colleagues not to come." I snapped back, stopping Richard in his tracks, his anger still evident. "What are you talking about? I meant I don't want to deal with you, an outsider," Richard shouted, disheveled, but his outburst couldn't change the situation. "Would the name Henry Williams explain the situation?" At that, Richard's face showed a flicker of recognition. I confirmed his reaction and continued. "My brother's name is Henry Williams." When I mentioned my brother's name, I could see Richard's face twist in fear. "What are you saying? Henry Williams, isn't that the name of our company's president?" Indeed, it might seem too coincidental, but Richard was an employee at the company my brother Henry managed. Previously, at a family meeting, Richard boasted about being an elite, revealing he worked for the large trading company my brother ran. Initially surprised, I knew Richard had no idea of my connection to Henry. However, when Richard declared he would no longer associate with me, I decided on my plan. After leaving home with Olivia, I discussed everything with my parents and confided in Henry. Henry was surprised, mentioning Richard wasn't the elite he claimed to be, and had little recognition in the company. Further inquiries by Henry revealed that Richard was only thought to be competent because of his more capable colleagues. Unaware of his poor reputation, Richard confidently invited many company associates to his wedding. Henry, angered by Richard's behavior towards me and Olivia, but remembering Richard's wish to invite many from the company, I asked Henry to delay the dismissal for revenge. This would shatter Richard's pride and embarrass him in front of Linda. Henry agreed to my plan, ensuring Richard would have no future involvement with our family. Richard and Linda were speechless upon learning everything. Joseph knew about Henry's business, but was incredulous to discover it was Richard's company. "You did this to embarrass me on purpose." Richard glared at me, pale-faced. "This is all your own doing. Looking down on others and hurting them, and now you play the victim?" I raised my voice at Richard's self-victimizing tone. I hadn't wanted to do this. Neither my brother nor Olivia wanted to ruin Linda's future. Tears welled up in my eyes as I thought about it. "Mom." Olivia gently placed her hand on my shoulder, sharing my distress. "Mary, leave the rest to me." I turned at the unexpected voice to see Henry. "Mr. President!" Henry glanced at Richard, then spoke to Linda. "Do you remember me? You might think of me as a stranger, but Mary and I have always cared about you." My brother continued sadly. "Richard may have said those words, but you also have a responsibility. As an adult, you must face that responsibility." Linda, in her wedding dress, bowed her head. "Richard, you will have to leave the company. Being a company-initiated resignation, you will struggle in your job search due to this fact. Richard would have to explain this resignation in future interviews, a sin he would carry forever." And for Richard, proud as he was, being fired seemed like an unbearable shame. "It's a lie. An elite like me getting fired? It's a lie." Richard repeated the words as if broken. "Richard? Richard!" Linda tried to shake Richard awake, but he collapsed, powerless. Joseph watched silently, neither complaining to me nor attacking me. The venue descended into panic, and the wedding became impossible. I apologized to Richard's parents and friends, explaining everything. I thought Richard's parents would blame my brother and me, but instead, they were furious with their son's actions and apologized to me and Olivia repeatedly. Desperately, they were pleading about something while Richard was in a state of semi-hysteria. We decided to cancel the wedding in consultation with Richard's parents and Joseph. Throughout the chaos, Richard never regained his sanity. Days after the wedding, Olivia and I were still at my parents' house. Olivia had no intention of living with Joseph or Linda again. I considered divorcing Joseph, but I wondered if that would really be the best thing for Olivia. I thought about it for a long time, but couldn't find an answer. Eventually, I realized that Joseph and I would likely not reunite. Olivia and I thought about renting an apartment, but my parents persuaded us to stay with them. Since we had the chance to be together again, we might as well stay here, I thought. I accepted my parents' generous offer to continue living with them. Meanwhile, Richard became mentally ill and stayed home. His pride, once unshakable, was shattered by his dismissal. Richard's parents never blamed me and apologized repeatedly for his behavior. He had betrayed his own parents by looking down on me. Linda left Richard and moved back with Joseph. She had grown weary of Richard's weakness and loss of everything. Linda, though not as devastated as Richard, was still shocked enough to return home after a long absence. She repeatedly contacted me to apologize, but I wasn't ready to accept it yet. I want Linda to fully understand the pain her actions have caused me over the years. This isn't something that can be easily resolved. To make her understand, I've been deliberately strict and have not been speaking to Linda. Olivia agrees with my feelings and also hasn't accepted Linda's apologies. Everyone makes mistakes, but not all can be undone. Despite Linda's reasons, I want her to deeply consider the hurt she caused to me and Olivia when we extended our hands to help. It's been several months since Olivia and I started our new life. There has been no progress in my relationship with Joseph. Olivia hasn't said much, but it seems she is also avoiding Joseph. Joseph appears to be deeply shocked by this situation, but he seems to be reflecting on his actions. Linda, since then, has been desperately job hunting and has started working. Having dropped out of high school, she is struggling due to her lack of work experience. Olivia seems somewhat relieved to hear about her sister's efforts. Reflecting on it, Olivia has always been on my side. She chose to leave Joseph and Linda, blood relatives, to be with me. I felt their value when we were living as a family of 4, but now I realize it even more. Olivia has grown close to my parents and often helps them. Seeing my parents' smiles, which I hadn't seen in a long time, makes me happy. Although I can no longer live with Joseph or Linda, I am satisfied with our new life. I vow to always cherish Olivia, who has always supported me and my parents, who warmly welcomed us.